Yes. Okay. So I think we are on. So thank you for coming and good evening. I would like to start by presenting a little bit about our host, Lola. And then after that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and let you introduce yourselves, okay? So I'm reading because I don't know how to say it just like that. So the Ladies of Liberty Alliance is a network of independent libertarian women leaders who are dedicated to spreading the ideas of individual liberty and a free society. Lola's mission is to educate and empower female leaders within the liberty movement, addressing the known shortage of women in the liberty movement by empowering a network of libertarian women leaders actively engaged in promoting the ideas of liberty through their local Lola social chapter. So the organizer of this event is Anna. She's the head of the local Israeli chapter. And I want to thank her for this. In this panel, we are here tonight to get inspired and learn from the philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand. Just to anybody who doesn't know Ayn Rand, which I'm sure it's very rare in this in this community, Ayn Rand was a Russian-American writer and philosopher known for her philosophy of objectivism. She emphasized the importance of individualism and rational self-interest and laissez-faire capitalism. Ayn Rand believed that individuals should pursue their own happiness as the highest moral purpose, and that selfishness, properly understood, is a virtue. She rejected altruism and collectivism. So Ayn Rand's novels, of course, are The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, serve as the best marketing tools for her philosophical, best marketing tools for her philosophical ideas, promoting self-reliance, reason, and the pursuit of personal achievement. I just want to tell you a little bit about me and Ayn Rand. So I was 15 when I first learned about Ayn Rand. It was in high school. I think it is similar to a lot of other objectivists. I studied advanced English, and my adored teacher, Sarah Friedland, that I want to say her name because she changed the course of my life. She gave us The Fountainhead to read, and we had to make book reports and everything. And since then, I was exposed to Ayn Rand, and after reading The Fountainhead in English, which was a challenge by itself at 15, I then moved to reading everything I could find about Ayn Rand, her fiction and nonfiction. And that really changed everything, changed the course of my life. Later in life, I did some social activism and political activism. I engaged in a few parties in Israel that were basically in the same idea of laissez-faire capitalism and libertarianism. What else can I tell you? So still relevant to this panel is that I studied to be a Montessori instructor, and I was a military officer in the IDF intelligence, which I'm going to ask you a little bit about. So I'm letting you know. And I'm a lawyer by education. My career in the past 10 years is in high tech. And I'm now in an organization called Startup Academy, where I partner with the founders to mentor them on how to build their own companies. So this is a little bit about me. And I would be very happy. I want to ask you the first question that I think is probably the most relevant nowadays, is after October 7th, to tell me a little bit how the ideas of Ayn Rand about individualism and objectivism, if you see them, how do you see them applied in political climate internationally, but especially applied or not applied in political climate. Especially, I would want to hear your opinion about Israel, if that's possible, if you know a little bit about that. If not, you can just say general internationally. And before you start, if it's possible to talk about yourself a little bit, take like 2 minutes and introduce yourself and your background related to, in general, and related to objectivism. So let's start with Angel and go on from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Libby, and thank you to Lola Israel for organizing this. It's great to be here. I'm originally from the US. I was telling Libby, I think before most of you guys came on, that I grew up in Wisconsin, but I've since moved to the UK and have worked more or less mostly with liberty and objectivist groups in the UK, although my main employer is Objective Standard Institute, which is based in the US but works internationally. As well as I also work with the Objective Standard, which is a journal, and there I'm an assistant editor and a writer. Should have said, I guess, at OSI, I am a fellow and programs manager. So I have both the side where I write and speak about intellectual issues, and also the logistical and organizational side, where I help with our main programs, which are our courses, our conferences, and our internship program. With all of that said, as sort of my introduction of me, I would say overall, sadly, I don't see Rand's ideas of individualism and objectivism being applied very often in the political climate. You guys in Israel are lucky to have her taught in high schools. That's very rarely the case anywhere in the West. It's certainly not the case in the US, and it's only the case in the UK for people who have chosen to study in their last couple of years of high school. You have some choice. If they choose to study politics at that time, then she's taught, but she's taught as a conservative thinker, which is better than nothing, but also I think does her a disservice. That said, you can see it in some parts of the social and political climate. I would say in the social climate especially, this new focus you see on self-care, I think in intention is well in alignment with rational self-interest, if not always in application. There's some good art that is inspired by Ayn Rand and her works. Some of you guys may be familiar with Firefly or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which were both created by Joss Whedon, who was inspired by Rand, among others. More recently, some people have written books, for better or for worse, that are inspired by Rand. And her fiction is still really popular. It's not as popular as it was at one point, but Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead continues to be popular, continues to gain traction. I know Isidora has done some work promoting the movie adaptation of We the Living. And so this still inspires people and influences people to this day. However, in politics outside the libertarian sphere, Rand's name, if it comes up at all, is dirt. Basically, nobody wants to talk about her ideas. Individualism is practically non-existent, with maybe a few exceptions like Javier Milei in Argentina. So collectivist and subjectivist ideas are thriving. We can see this with egalitarianism, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, with some forms of environmentalism, with the sort of cartel around social security in the US and around public education almost everywhere. And philosophers don't take her seriously either. So sadly, I would say mostly she's missing from the social and political sphere. I'm not super familiar with the Israeli situation. I know sort of the general outline and the basics, and I think what a lot of people are, I think objectivism's contribution to the conversation can be and should be, and in some places is, looking at Palestinian authorities, such as they are, versus Israeli authorities and how they protect rights. Because on the objectivist view, the main purpose of government is to protect individual rights. And if you compare those, then you can see that Israel's government has done a better job of protecting individual rights overall, even though, of course, it is not perfect. So.
Yes. I would like you to address the fact, I think that the good thing about studying objectivism and the absorption of Ayn Rand's ideas into the general public without giving her probably credit, maybe she's not the only liberal philosopher, is the right, in Israel it's very common now after October 7th, the talk about the right to protect yourself, the right of self-interest, in terms of the rights of the Israelis to protect themselves from the attacks of Palestinians, anti-Semites, etc. But I wanted to know about because I see the rejection and I see the hate in the world against that idea, and even the fact that Israel is trying to protect itself against it. I see that there is like an uprising in the world saying that Israel shouldn't do it and should give the other cheek in essence, in order to protect, so to speak, the innocent people in Gaza. So this is, I will let Isidora and Mathilde answer, and then I'll come back to you if you have anything else to say about this. So Mathilde, please, if you can, don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yes, of course.
Take
So
a few minutes, as much as you want, because it's important for us to hear about you.
yeah, sure. So hello, my name is Mathilde Berger-Perrin. I'm a French journalist and writer, and I just published a book in France named Ayn Rand, L'égoïsme comme héroïsme, meaning the egoism as heroism. And it's basically a short introduction for the French public about Ayn Rand's ideas, and it's like really short, and the idea is really that a French reader who might never have heard about her knows a bit of her life, the global idea of what she was thinking on the philosophical side, but also political side and social side. And there is also a very big part of it, which is individualism, which is for me the best door for a French reader to enter into Ayn Rand's ideas. So this is it. Basically, I just to introduce shortly myself, I've been studying political sciences, literature, philosophy, and at the end of the journey, it was cognitive sciences as well. I started working as a journalist for innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. I did a bit of cybersecurity, and then I've been a journalist dedicated to feminism and liberal feminism in particular, libertarian. I don't want to, because liberal in French is not the same meaning as liberal in the US.
Also in the rest of the world. So in Israel, we struggle with that also.
Yeah, so this is like
use liberal in this objectivist cycles. For what other cycles say libertarian, so you can use liberal here.
Okay, so liberal, and I'm trying to make it popular in French and in France as well. So to answer the first question, well, as you may know, French are not very fond of capitalism and free market, and like we're basically strike is our national sport. So we are not like the French policy and political climate is really far from Ayn Rand's idea, and really, and is not going to be. I don't really see it coming in the future. I don't see how in a short-term period the French people could just embrace Ayn Rand ideas. She is not known at all, like really at all. And my book was a kind of a surprise for a lot of people, because she's associated with the radical right. A lot of people directly think about Donald Trump, or really like very intense rights in the US. They actually don't know the novels at all. But what is fun is like they consume a lot of series, TV shows that mention her or that make obvious reference to her, and they like the ideas, but they just don't put the name on it. So this is what I try to do with my book, is like, oh my God, you like this idea? Guess what? It's a Ayn Rand's idea. So this is how I try to introduce her. Consider what about Israeli climate right now. I'm not a specialist, so I don't know how I can answer that question. But if I look at it from Ayn Rand's point of view or Ayn Rand's idea, I would say that the fact people abroad are badly reacting to the fact that Israeli people should protect themselves is because they don't see them as individual. They see them as like crowds and people that think they're superior, so they think they have the right to defend themselves, which is clearly not how we should look at the situation. But from France perspective, for example, this is really the case. They think that because there is religious belief behind the Israeli population, so the fact that they should defend themselves is just because they think they're superior to the other, which is like not how we should consider an Israeli, not how we should consider a Palestinian, and not how we should consider a French guy. So this is the big mistake, and this is how I think maybe Ayn Rand's idea could be like useful to better understand or to have a better perspective on what happened now. But this is as far as I can go to interpret the situation, because I'm not a specialist.
Okay. I would want to afterwards, if any of you can, because you mentioned radical right, and I wanted to, maybe we can go around again after Isidora will speak about the war and the political situation in Israel. Maybe talk about Geert Wilders in Holland, and the immigration problem in Europe, because if you're relating objectivism and Ayn Rand to the radical right, then it must be, we must interpret the differences, the common things and the differences between the radical right and Ayn Rand. So I want to go back to it because you mentioned it, and it's important not to lose this point, okay? Okay, so Isidora, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Libby. And nice to see all of you, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. So my name is Isidora Kolar. I am currently the CEO of the New Intellectuals Network, which is a new US-based nonprofit which focuses on helping new pro-liberty leaders start their own organizations across the world. This has been something that I wanted to do for a long time now, and something that I kind of have been doing at my previous job, but more like as a side thing. And the reason why you guys invited me today is because I spent the past 6 years working at the Ayn Rand Center Europe, where I was the CEO for the last 3 years. And with that job, basically, that's how I didn't get introduced necessarily to objectivism through the job, but that's what got me hooked for the rest of my life to objectivist ideas. So that's basically where my objectivist story began. And then when it comes to Israel, the interesting thing is that before I started my previous job, I ran a few like small organizations, and one of them was a local organization called Ben-Gurion Center for Modern Israel Studies, which basically focused on promoting Israel and Serbia and kind of helping better Israel's image in our society. And so this is like very special for me because I always like to talk to Israeli crowds, and it's kind of putting together two things that I'm really passionate about. And to answer your first question about Ayn Rand's influence on the society and politics now. So I absolutely agree there with Angel and Mathilde that, you know, you don't see a lot of Rand's influence, unfortunately, in the global society, let's call it that, and especially in politics. I do, however, see a lot of, you know, those ideas, even, you know, more often than not, they didn't necessarily come from reading Rand. They just came to people naturally because, you know, they want to take care of their own self-interest. a lot of people also have tendencies to be rational and to make rational decisions and choices. And that's where I see those ideas the most in the individuals who I work with and who I still work with. And the good thing is that there are a lot of those kind of people everywhere in the world. The bad thing is that obviously culturally and politically we have pretty much no influence right now. And that's the main reason, you know, why some of us are running these Ayn Rand centers and other objectivist organizations, because the only way we can change that is to actually actively do something about that. And then when it comes to Israel, I think what Israel is doing right now is in pretty much every way in accordance with Rand's philosophy. Israel is defending itself from a terrible attack that happened on October the 7th, and from the not just possibility, but it's like a fact that if your government didn't do anything about it right now, those kinds of attacks would happen again and again. And so this is a classic example of self-defense when it comes to the state protecting the individual rights of its citizens.
Yes. The only problem is that the philosophies that are dominant in the world today are philosophies, Christian philosophies or altruistic philosophies. And the fact that Israel is talking or applying rational self-protection doesn't come across well to a lot of people in the world, not just Palestinians themselves, but others as well. But I must say, if you can say that nothing good happened from the October 7th, but if something that you can see that is good in that sense is that in Israel something awakened, in the sense that people are talking about the right of Israel to protect itself, and the right and the better, us being on the better moral side of this equation. At least internally we talk. I hear about that internationally. It's a very bad situation, but at least in Israel, which I didn't see before. Before, I think even the internal sound, internal voices in Israel were a little bit, not a little, a lot Christian in that way. Let's protect the Palestinians. Let's protect the innocents. They're not talking about the fact that behind every innocent child, there's a bomb waiting for us, or there's a missile waiting to be shot at us, or something like that. So that's the only positive maybe thing that I see in the way we think in Israel now. So if we can go back just 1 minute to talk about what Mathilde mentioned, the radical right, before we go on to other subjects. So not just Geert Wilders, but I see other parties and organizations in the world or in Europe now talking about the immigration problem and the problem of non-European European cultures being absorbed into Europe. And I would want all of you to address what is similar in what Geert Wilders says to objectivism and what is not similar in that sense to objectivism. And we can start in the same order again. And if somebody has something to say, just either electronically raise your hand or just show me and I let you speak. Okay, Angel, thank you.
Yeah, so conservatives or right versus left is really not a very fundamental distinction, and it varies from country to country. And as you noted, we have an international panel here who have different experiences with different groups. But generally, a lot of conservatives tend to be very religious, and they tend to at least say that they want smaller government. This is not always true, but usually they'll give lip service to the idea. And it's mixed. If you look at history, for example, Margaret Thatcher read Rand, Obviously, this did not influence her religiosity, but it did, I think, inspire her to be as principled as she was and to push through against massive opposition to privatize much of Britain's economy and save it essentially from the socialism that it was falling into. So, in the sense that some conservatives are inspired by Rand, and to the extent that conservatives want smaller government, like they say they do, most of them, then Rand and the conservatives are in alignment. There are a lot of issues, however, on which they tend to differ. Rand criticized the American right a lot for wanting to ban abortion, and that was a huge issue on which she differed. One she didn't talk about as much, but which I think is also a difference, is immigration. And where exactly you draw the line on immigration, there's a little bit of debate among objectivists, but the general principle that individuals should be able to live their lives as they choose includes the fact that you should be able to live anywhere that somebody will sell you a house, basically. And there's, as long as you are not a major security threat. If you're a terrorist, that's a different question. But if you're not a terrorist, if you're not carrying a major, like, contagious disease, I'm not talking about COVID here, but something, you know, more serious, then there's no reason you shouldn't be allowed to enter a country to live there. The idea of stealing jobs is ridiculous. And the idea of, in terms of the culture meshing, empirically, it's not that serious. There have been some studies done showing that usually by second generation, immigrants have learned the native language, they are more tolerant, their values are more in alignment with the country that they've moved to, which makes sense. Why else are they moving there? But to the other extent, if the culture is rational and people are prepared to defend it and hold on to it, then it will prevail even if you have a few more people coming. Now, I know some countries in Europe have experienced a little bit more crime than the US has in terms of coming from immigrants. And so maybe that necessitates a rethinking about specific types of immigrants. But overall, there's just no reason, if you're looking at an individual's right to live his or her own life, which Objectivism upholds very, very strongly, that as long as the person is not likely to be somebody who would violate rights, and when I say likely to be, I mean has a history of, because otherwise you don't know for sure that they're likely to, then there's no reason to stop them from entering a country.
I must challenge you. Just a second, Mathilde and Isidora, I'll let you. Firstly, you said that second generation usually assimilate within the other culture. And I've recently read a book by, I see Yal here, but I don't know, by, what's his name? The book about the immigration to Europe. I don't remember the name right now. Saying that actually Muslims that immigrated into Europe in the past 2 decades, they did not assimilate within the general population. And also, I want to challenge you in terms of you saying that if they don't specifically show criminal tendencies, but sometimes as a culture, there is things that we see as criminal. For example, female circumcision, very common rape between Muslim immigrants into, for example, Sweden. Sweden, I think it was in that book that gave the facts, made Sweden from a country that didn't experience a lot of rape to the firstly ranked in Europe in terms of rape. So there is a problem, I think, with the culture of Muslims coming into Europe and with their very tribal, not individual, sometimes very violent culture. And the fact that we say that doesn't make it, doesn't make us racist. We just stating the facts. So I just want to challenge you, and then Mathilde and Isidora, if you can address that as well. Yes.
So if I could just respond to that quickly. So I totally agree you should be able to challenge Islam without being called an Islamophobe or a racist or anything like that. I think firstly you have to not judge an individual by their culture. So an individual may be wanting to leave that culture because they're that country because they no longer agree with that culture. So I don't know what the full solution there is, but you can't condemn somebody because of where they were born, I think. The other thing is, I think part of the problem in terms of assimilation that we've seen in Europe, and I can certainly speak for the UK's experience in this regard, is that they have formed little enclaves, little ghettos, for lack of a better word, and then local authorities have dealt with the leaders of those or communities rather than with the people directly. This was especially a problem in the UK with Muslim groups, particularly from Pakistan, where they were grooming young girls, and there was a lot of rape and sexual assault going on, and the police,
Yes.
rather than dealing with the perpetrators directly, dealt with the leaders of the community. So again, the problem was dealing with it as a community and as a group rather than dealing with the individual perpetrators and the individual victims.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you, Angel. Mathilde, please.
So, well, to answer the first question, which is like the common ideology.
Denominator. Yes, with
Sorry?
radical common denominator with the radical right. Yes.
Yeah, radical right. Well, of course, well, I totally agree. The fact that most of the time, far right and rightists in general prefer smaller states than the leftists. So it makes sense that they like Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was not monarchist, so she really wanted a government that protects people. So this is also something that is very convenient when you come from the right side, because you like a kind or type of authority and order in a way. And but what makes it totally for me incoherent is like she was really big criticizer of the Christian religion and also the moral the moral view they have on how someone should conduct his life. Abortion is one of is one of the topics, but there are also others. And on immigration particularly, she was herself an immigrant, and she contributed like enormously to the American culture, because she is still like one of the most read book in the US. So of course, this is the example of immigration that the right doesn't sometimes want to see, and they name her, they follow her, or they sometimes mention her as an example, but actually they are not consistent with her views on many aspects, and especially on herself as an immigrant. So this is like kind of funny. Well, about immigration and Muslim immigration in particular, well, I live in a country where it's like a very big problem, and I live in Prague, but my country, France, it's like a very intense debates all the time about that, and the far right is very popular about because of that. I think there is two reasons for that. First of all, the way we treat immigrants is like very bad, really bad, and there are a lot of stupid laws that don't enable people to find a proper job, to go out of their community, to really learn the language, and to know how we behave in France, and especially with women, because this is the main problem. You mentioned rape in Switzerland, in Sweden, but it's the same problem here. That we have a very big problem of security. It doesn't necessarily come from immigrants, but it comes from second or third generation of people. So indeed, this is something. And also, we don't have a very strong narrative to French strong narrative or ideology. I mean by that most of them are behaving according to the way they practice their religious belief and how they see the civilization through it. But we don't offer something else. Like objectivism is another ideology that could help conduct your life with a very strong philosophy. But we are not Christian anymore, so we don't have this, alternative to propose. We don't have a very clear line of what is laïcité in France, which is like a kind of moral philosophy that everyone is equal, whatever your culture, your religious beliefs, and it's this universalism we try to promote, but it doesn't really work because they don't have a very good story to sell, actually. So this is it. And the thing is, we have people coming, and that they don't really they can't feel belonging to something else than the community they left, actually. So this is how they hold to something they know rather than something which is new, because it's not clear. It's not a clear offer. So I would say that the main problem with immigration, actually, in France is not really there is a problem sometimes with a radical kind of Islam, but the main problem is more how we welcome those people. And for example, it's really, really hard to find a job or to get the paper to have a job. So they are on the territory and they have to wait like 3 or 4 years before to be maybe able to find a job. So they live in like misery for a long time. And for women, this is terrible because most of them are prostitutes, but prostitution, a lot of immigration. But to give you a number, 94% of the prostitutes in France are coming from immigration and Muslim immigration. So this is enormous, but we have a very big ban on prostitution, like not flexible at all. So they're like, okay, either I do it and I risk my life, or I go back to my country. So this is not a solution. And of course, the community, like Muslim community in France, are not going to welcome them as well, because they are doing something which is more really evil. So just to give you an idea of how we welcome immigrants in France, it's like terrible. So this is it. And also the last thing, but I think we will talk about it later. It's the narrative that is the more common on the moral basis between people is a Marxist one. There are oppressor, there are oppressed people, and you try to make people fit in one of those two groups. And typically, immigrants are seen by the left as the oppressed and seen by the right by the oppressors. So there is no possible debate, actually, on the question that could be rationally addressed in France.
Thank you. I just want to say, somebody wrote to me, it's Douglas Murray's book, The Weird Death of Europe. That was the book I was referring to, with a lot of information. I want to recommend to all of you to read it, because it's very important. And I would say that I just want to continue my challenge to say that I think the immigrants that came to the US usually came to the US because they loved the American way. They wanted the American way. They wanted the ideas of America. I don't think that's the story with the Muslims coming into Europe. It's a completely different kind of philosophy and ideas that are ruling that kind of population. And I think there is a difference there. And it's an interesting subject because objectivists split on that subject. So I like subjects that we don't agree on. So anyway, Isidora, please, you have the last word about, and by the way, when you said far right in France, you mean Marine Le Pen?
Well, she's not even the farthest right now, but I would say like 1 year ago it was the case, but now it goes like really far and far because of this problem that people have no tolerance anymore, and they want things to change. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. Isidora, please.
Okay, so on the question of the far right, I don't think we have that much in common with them, to be honest. I just think they are less of a problem right now than the far left, because I think they have less of an influence on Western cultures. But otherwise, I'm not talking here about conservatives, even though I disagree on a lot of things with conservatives. But when I'm talking about far right, I'm talking about people who are hardcore nationalists, racists often. And I mean, it's very hard to find commonalities with them, because even when they say they want small government, they just don't want the government that's not doing things that they wanted to do, but they wouldn't mind having an authoritarian government that actually does stuff that they want to see done. So that's the first thing. And when it comes to immigration, I think the biggest problem both in Europe and the US right now is the fact that there seem to be two extremes. So on one hand, you have people who are for completely unrestricted immigration, in a sense where no one checks who's coming into the country. And I personally think that's a problem. And then on the other hand, you have people who don't want any immigration or a very, very restricted immigration. And I don't agree with that either. And I think the biggest reason why that's happening is because Western governments have been really lousy in doing their jobs. It's a complete paradox when you look at the United States, for example. If you want to legally immigrate to the United States, you have to go through so much hoops. And I mean, you literally have to win a lottery to get in the country and stay permanently. And then on the other hand, you have like masses of people immigrating from the South. No one checks who those people are. And I understand that a lot of Americans are frustrated about that. And it's similar in Europe. It's similar in Europe. It's much harder to immigrate legally. While you can, come on a boat and, you're welcomed, and, you can do whatever you want. I think there needs to be some kind of control over who comes into the country, because, when you travel somewhere, you can't just, if you're outside of EU, you can't just, cross the border and like no one checks it. It's like against the law to do that. So there needs to be some kind of control. That's not happening right now, and that's provoking this extreme reaction on the far right, where, and not just the far right, like people on the right, I think, agree right now that there has to be some limit to immigration, and I think that's ultimately gonna harm people who just want to come and live better lives in better societies.
I must admit, thank you. I must admit that I don't see, I see a problem here, because I don't see objectivism giving the solution here to the problem. And there is a problem with the immigration into Europe. I think if we go deep and we analyze with the ideas of objectivism, yes, then it gives the right answer. But because Ayn Rand was, I think Ayn Rand wouldn't have been pro-free immigration of Muslims into Europe nowadays, like it is now. But people try to take her ideas of free society, open borders, because if all of the world were democratic and free and liberal, and to apply them to the situation today, which is not the case. But okay, I'm going to leave that subject because we have other subjects as well. And I'm going to change a little. I was aiming to ask this just Angel, but since we took some of the time, I want to ask you, because this is a very interesting subject for me. So I'm going back to love and relationships, leaving war and going to love. So I saw a video that Anna sent me by Angel that spoke about self-esteem and the importance of self-esteem in forming love relationships. And I wanted to ask Angel and then the rest of you for two things. Firstly, if you could elaborate on how individuals, on how we can work on our self-esteem and our character in the goal of enhancing our love relationships. That's one thing. And then I will ask both of you as well. But also in the case of Angel, if you can share with us how you met your husband, because I think it's relevant to the story here, and how it relates to the story. So please, Angel, thank you.
Certainly, yeah. So thanks to Isidora as well, because that talk I gave at a conference she organized. So, well, she and her organization.
Oh.
But yeah, so I think some of the main ways that you can improve your self-esteem is, firstly, focus on building an evidence-based view of yourself. Look at the facts of how you are, and try to improve where necessary. But also, one of the biggest problems when people have low self-esteem is that they're not acknowledging the positives enough. There's I think Nathaniel Branden was the one who I read this from, an objectivist psychologist, who wrote, like, people tend to do this yeah but. Oh, sure, yeah, I got good grades in school, yeah, but it was easy for me. Oh, I built this business, yeah, but I had a great team helping me. Whenever you find yourself doing the yeah buts when somebody points something out to you, that's usually a sign that you're not appreciating yourself well enough. So the first thing I would say is focus on building an evidence-based view of yourself. And this is very in line with objectivism, you're being objective, right? And not evading. You're looking at all of the facts. And if the facts are that there's something you need to improve on, then you work to improve on that thing. And it can be uncomfortable, of course, and there are a lot of tools that the more rational psychologists have put out there. But the goal is to improve yourself and to look at the facts about how you are. One thing that I kind of alluded to when I was saying, oh, self-care isn't always well executed, is people will tell you to just say that you're great, to start looking in the mirror and giving these affirmations. And if you've ever tried it, you know it's useless. And in fact, sometimes even worse than useless, because just by telling yourself that you are a certain way, if you are not in fact yet that way or working to become that way, then what you're telling yourself subconsciously is that you're a liar. If I start telling myself every day in the mirror that I'm a great guitarist, and I've never picked up a guitar in my life, then I'm just telling myself I'm lying to myself. And so that teaches, subconsciously, it teaches me that I'm not trustworthy. So if we want to build better self-esteem, you have to focus on the evidence. You have to appreciate your accomplishments. And in terms of, you always do want to improve, but stop being mean to yourself and focus on being productive. If you were in a work situation where you had a boss that was giving you a lot of criticism and only some of it was actually helpful, you would consider that a toxic boss and you would look for a different job. So don't do that to yourself. It's one thing to observe that there's something you need to improve on or something that you made a mistake on, but then observe it, fix it if you can. If you need to learn something, if you need to do some introspecting, if you need to do whatever you need to do to fix it, then do, and then you move on. And you just work on implementing that. And some objectivists I know have really worked on, because they tend to criticize themselves a lot, they've worked on building the opposite by building a physical reminder of their accomplishments, like a scrapbook or a little shrine or something like that. So if you're somebody who really struggles with self-criticism, try it. It might help. And then on the subject of love, it's so important for love that you have positive self-esteem. If you don't, you're going to think, if you fundamentally have the idea that you're not worthy of happiness, then you're going to end up sabotaging relationships. You're going to end up accepting, either trying to sort of become a chameleon and accept the other person's values uncritically, or to accept treatment that's less than you deserve, or to treat other people badly because subconsciously you think you're not worthy of it. So there's a lot of reasons to build up your self-esteem, either in order to have that path open to you for a positive relationship or to better improve your current relationships. And then, Libby, you also asked about my husband and I. We actually met at an objectivist conference, Ayn Rand Con, back in 2016. And it was one of those, if you've ever been to a conference, sometimes, you speak to somebody on the first night and then you never talk to them again for the rest of the conference. But we added each other on Facebook. We kept talking. We met up a couple of times. And we met actually in Paris again in 2019. And that's where we had a really long, the city of love, I know. We met to meet up for like 3 hours. We ended up like hanging out for 8 hours and talking for a long time and realizing that we had a lot of deep values in common, including many of the things we learned from objectivism, and built up a relationship from there. So
good for you. Have you been married in how long already?
Yeah, we've been married about 2.5 years now.
Nice. I'm getting to you, Mathilde and Isidora. I just want to say that I took the happiness team by Tal. It's funny if you know. You probably all know him. And he gave a suggestion I think to write down, you said to be evidence-based and not to evade reality, right? So Tal gave some advice. I think it's not originally objectivist or Tal's, but the advice was every day before you go to sleep, or whatever time that you think about, write your positive things that happened or positive achievements that you had in the day, no matter how small or how big, to get a rational, objective view of what happened in your life in that sense. And I'm going to add, he talked about in the happiness team, but I don't know exactly how to frame it in his words, but I'm going to say in my words, in order to become more productive, I think writing down your plan in every area of your life would be a very, so also in building your own character, you build your career, you build your physical shape, you build your mental shape. So if you write in every area of your life, you set a plan and you put some goals and you work in order to achieve them, then at this process elevates your self-esteem. And I think it makes you a more interesting person, and in that sense, a more lovable person. So that's my 2 cents for that. But yes, Mathilde.
So I'm so glad we went into that topic, because I actually read Ayn Rand for the first time after a very long and toxic relationship, and this is what makes me like love her at first sight, because so I was very young and I was with someone for 5 years, and at the end of this relationship, it was hard to split. Because we actually build ourselves in the look of the other. You know, we really wanted to please the other, and we were super young. And this is typically the moment you have to build yourself as an adult, as an individual, and to be strong. And we couldn't do it because we were kind of fusional, and it was really hard. And I opened the Fountainhead, and for the very first time in the literature, I see something I've never read before, which is this idea that love is not unconditional. There is a condition of love. You have to win something in the relationship, and this is an egoistic point of view, but this is really the only way a good love can last, actually, if there is a win-win relationship. And this is crazy because I think you have the scene in mind. It's when Dominique is like, let's go, and I will iron your shirts, and I will take care of the household, and everything will be fine. And Howard say, no, I don't want you like this. I want you as a very strong piece by yourself. I don't want an empty cup. I want you as a very strong individual. And this is the only way I can love you. I don't want to love the reflex of my values in your eyes. I want to love you and your own values and what you choose to pursue, actually. And I was 20 or 22, or I don't remember. And I was like, what the fuck? This is a revolution in literature. I studied literature, and I was like, what? For the first time, there is a condition to love, like, really? And there is nothing to feel guilty about it. So it was like a very, very good start for me. And then I realized how much, so it's more about how you build yourself, and that you say, Angel, to build yourself according to evidence and how you are. And I realized that the way I was raised is a really people-pleasing way. You feel satisfied about yourself because you are actually behaving according to criteria that has been decided to be moral. And then you are a bit lying to yourself more and more, because you don't really feel proud of yourself. You feel proud because you have good mark according to this institution, because you behave correctly according to your dad's point of view, or according to the lover you have, and you see him happy, so you feel happy. But you're never the first person in the in the story. And this is a sadly, I discovered it just at 22, which is young, but I wish I could have learned that or read that before. And now every young girl I see, from boys actually, I see, I said, okay, you really should read the Fountainhead, because I think this is actually the only way to build correct relationship. Would it be for love, but also for friendship, and even working relationship. If you are working on a basis on rational thinking, and if you do understand the value and the others and why he's pursuing it, what the virtues he's using to pursue it, then it makes people even more tolerant, and like it creates a better understanding from the start. And what I wanted to say is also to act with coherence, because as soon as you start to choose your value, please try to find a way that works with you and you're not lying to yourself. So basically, I know a lot of people that are very, very leftist, but they are working in corporate institutions that are not like fitting their moral values. So they are super alienated, because they're like, yeah, I'm working for a business, but I am an anti-capitalist. And I'm like, yeah. So it's going to be hard. Life is going to be long for you. It's going to be a real problem at some point. So yeah, basically this is it. And I just wanted to end up with the question of marriage, because we mentioned Angel's one. For me, after reading Ayn Rand, the marriage is like really two very strong individuals that decided to go together and not making one. You know, this is sometimes this is what we heard at the wedding. It's like, okay, now you are the half. Sometimes people say, where is your half? Like, no, I'm not a half. I am a full individual, and we are getting married together to be a better two, but not one. I think it doesn't make sense, and it's like a very kind of Christian view also of a relationship, and it's not, I think, how happiness can be built through love.
Thank you. Very interesting. So Ayn Rand is a marriage counsel as well. I think she's actually a very good one. If I can summarize, in the way she rejected altruism in relationships, not the fact that you're not taking your spouse into account, but you're not crossing yourself or not giving up your identity in order to delve into the relationship. And I don't think pleasing your spouse is bad, just as long as you're pleasing yourself as well, in love and in relationship. So thank you for this. Very interesting. Yes, Isidora.
Well, I have a few thoughts on this. I'm not married, so I don't have that perspective. But my view on this is that to have a happy relationship and a happy marriage, I think you first need to have a happy life on your own as an individual, because otherwise, if you're looking, you know, for someone else to make you happy and to make your life happy, that's most likely not going to happen, because it's up to us to make ourselves happy and not up to other people. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that people need to realize that to be in a high quality relationship and with other people who are high quality, they need to have things that they bring on the table. We live in this culture where the kind of popular mindset is, I want to be loved for me, and not for my job, and not for how I look, and not for this and not for that. And then like when you look at that list, those are all things that make us who we are. So like there's no sense of us beyond basically all of those things on that list. Like what is left there if you exclude all of those things? What is left there to love? And people often are they have this mindset that there's some other essence of them that needs to be loved and that needs to be perceived. And that's not true. You have to work on yourself. You have to work both on how you look and how you think and what you do, and like what are the things that you're bringing to the table as a person. All of those things are very important to have a great relationship. And I think many things would be much different in the world with, you know, all the divorce rates and whatnot, if people actually understood this. And instead of focusing on, you know, how can we get back women into the house and kitchen to keep them in the marriage, I think, you know, conservatives should start thinking a little bit about, you know, what they're actually bringing to the marriage. Not just conservatives, obviously, but yeah.
Yes, interesting. So it brings me, I don't know, Anna, I tried asking you on WhatsApp, but I don't know. It's now 7:30. Just give me the times. I have another question that I can address everyone. It really a little bit relates to this one, but in a different way. So I just need the cue from Anna. Anna, you can write it to me on WhatsApp. So let me ask this question. I think it's going to be the last question. Unless there is I didn't read the chat, unless there is a very important question in the chat, which Anna can send me on WhatsApp. So let me ask you about, so this is basically, I wrote it for Mathilde, but I want to ask, because Mathilde studied political science. Angel also studied political science, right?
A little, just a little.
Yes.
I don't have a degree in it.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to ask about feminism, because it's a question also in debate amongst, you know, liberal, they say liberal feminism. So what does it mean? And as I put it for the question, a liberal view of feminism. How do you align Ayn Rand's ideas with the current feminist movement? Okay. So again, as we asked about the radical right, I'm asking about feminism. What's similar between feminism and objectivism, and what's not similar? And where do we have to, you know, I ask those questions for our audience in order for them to be able to see what, you know, when they read the news and when they see an article and when they see reality come to them, to know the nuances and to be able to analyze it correctly and say, this is right, but this is wrong, and not take it as a whole bunch. You know, I want to be a feminist, then I will take the whole idea and not. So please, if you can refer to that. And then I think that will be the last official question. And then we'll see from there. So Angel.
Yeah.
Unless, wait.
Mathilde may have more to say than I do. Yeah.
Yes, maybe we start with Mathilde in this question, and then we go back to, yes.
Okay, sorry, Angela. Well, I try to be quick because there are so many things to say about it. First of all, the question sometimes to me is more, how do we align Ayn Rand's idea with the current feminist movement rather than the contrary? Because sometimes it goes too far and it's like really far from the reality. But first, first is I mean, in most of the feminist movements, I don't say every feminist movement, but most of them have totally embraced the idea that capitalism is at the source of women oppression. And this is because if we fight capitalism, then we will have this perfect equality that we've lost. And this narrative is really dangerous because if you see in the past, I mean, I think no one on earth, and especially in Western and Eastern and every kind of country, would like to be dropped past in the past and living like in the 16th century as a woman or in 17th century as a woman. So everything changed drastically for women, and feminism actually rise at the moment that there is the force is not doing is not like super important, meaning that industrial revolution enables women to have access to job, enable women to have access to make their own money, and to have a real value on the public life rather than just in the intimate life. So this is like, I'm not going into the detail, but this is really how feminism works now. It's like, if we fight capitalism, then it's going to be better, and we will go back to a golden age that actually never happened. So this is how Ayn Rand could be really interesting on that point, because she is advocates for capitalism. Then I would say, well, Ayn Rand was not like a feminist per se. She said she was a male chauvinist, but on so many aspects, she is an example of feminism, which is incredible. First of all, she decided to be a famous writer, and she did. She managed to do it, and she was a girl in actually in ideas that was mostly shared by men. And mostly like in men, men environments, meaning like Hollywood, writing, editor, and of course libertarian and liberal circles. Then she actually gave birth to Danny Taggart, which is like a heroine at a CEO of a train corporation, and we are in 57. It's amazing for that time. And I'm not speaking about Dominique Francois, but Dominique Francois is like 43. It's crazy to have women with this kind of responsibility as heroine at that time. And there is also something that is, well, her personal life. She aborted, and she spoke about abortion in front of like an entire crowd of conservative men, and it was like 5 years before Roe versus Wade. I don't know how many women could have this bravery today. So this is amazing from that perspective. But there is also something she had in common with the current feminist movement, which is fighting against all the stereotypes. And typically when Danny Taggart goes, to the John Galt's, the Galt's Gulch, she actually said, okay, I'm going to do the domestic course, but I need a salary in return. And this is something really popular in the feminist movement, because they're like, oh, we should be paid for the job we do at her home. But she actually wrote that like 20 years before this idea comes into the feminist movement. So she is kind of a visionary. And also there is something which is a sensible topic, but I must bring it. It's they have...
I like sensitive topics. Please do.
She's not considered as a feminist because of the fact that her earrings are submissive kind of sexual thing. So they are always in a submissive postures when they are having sex with the heroes. But what brings me back to the stereotypes is like Danny Taggart or Dominique Francois are indeed submissive in the bed, but during days they are actually deciding on the future of a lot of men, and especially Dominique, she can do whatever she wants with her world popularity. She can decide if he's in the newspaper or if he's not. She can decide if he's going to build a house or not, but she's submissive in the bed. And it's the same with Danny Taggart. She could do whatever she wants with she's actually directing a lot of men, because the corporation is like full of men and she's the boss. But indeed, in bed, she's a submissive.
Why do you say she's submissive? I mean, that's a very, sorry, we're going into sex here, but Ayn Rand talks a lot about being feminist in terms of being, high heels and stockings and whatever. But I don't see that necessarily as being submissive. If you want to give me the exact examples that you're referring to, because as a personal experience, I never experienced feminine characters in Ayn Rand's books as being submissive.
No, it's
Yeah.
during the, I'm really referring to the sex scenes.
Sexually.
Yeah. Only on that point. No, on the contrary, she likes that the women are super well dressed and feminine, and this is something which is important because you break the stereotypes as well. Dani Taggart is like very feminine, but she is actually a CEO of a very masculine firm. So I really like this work really as a feminist point of view. But when I'm pointing there is like a lot of feminist and current feminist movement said, oh, Ayn Rand is not feminist because of the submissive sex scenes in the book, but I don't see it as a problem. I don't see it as a reason to avoid her from the feminist debate because she could bring a lot of things. And and also there is something which is super important, and I think this is maybe the main thing to retain for feminist movement. It's individualism, because they are having this Marxist thing with oppressor and oppressed, and women are always oppressed, and with the diversity and inclusion, this is like even complicated to understand, because sometimes you can be oppressed because you're a woman, but you're not oppressed because you're that type of woman. So it's a scale that is really complicated to understand. But what is super important is individualism. And when you really ask questions to feminists that are from collectivist movements, you're like, what do you think is the basic thing acceptable for women condition? Do you want them to be able to work? Do you want them to be able to have money? Do you want them to be able to have sex freely? Do you want them to be able to dress like they want? They're like, yes, absolutely, I want that. Yes, guess what? It's individualism. So this is how because they are not thinking the same, but the same way, but actually we are speaking about the very same thing. It's just you don't think it's possible through capitalism, through individualism, and through Ayn Rand's ideas. So this is how I try to create a liberal feminism from this point of view. So yeah, that's it.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, Mathilde. So you're giving us the tools on how to market individualism into the general public. Thank you. So Angel, please. And then Isidora, and you'll have the last word. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes, Mathilde brought up a lot of great points there, and I definitely agree that overall, if you want to be coherent and defend the genuinely good goals that feminists have, you have to be an individualist. And I would say, in terms of what those goals are that I would regard as genuinely good, that are in alignment with objectivism, is that women need careers, and even if that career is for a short period of time, raising, or maybe even a long period of time, raising children, if you take that seriously, that can be a legitimate purpose for all. And I would even argue that could be a man's legitimate purpose for her portion of their lives. And she says this explicitly in her nonfiction. She also has a bit in the Galt's Gulch bit in Atlas Shrugged that Mathilde referred to, where she has a woman there who's raising these kids that are great. They love life. They're interested. They're not for lack of a better term, sniveling little brats that she was seeing out in the outside world. So there's a respect for motherhood, but not as a duty, only as a choice and as a purpose. And that's, I think, the key thing is purpose is necessary for everyone, and it's no different for women. Women also obviously need choice, but again, so does everyone. So this is where the individualism comes in, and of course, equal rights. And in terms of equal rights, this is where it's helpful. I think my boss, Craig Biddle, introduced me to a sort of basic schematic when you're talking about how oppressed are women actually, which is to look at it in the different levels. There are essentially 4 different levels. There's the political level, there's the cultural level, the familial level, and the individual level. If you look at it on the political level, in the West, women really aren't oppressed, except for maybe the only argument I can see, and it's a teensy tiny one, is in the countries where like menstrual products are taxed. And that's a small thing, right? And there was a big protest about this in the UK a couple of years ago, because there's no reason that it was being taxed as a luxury item, which it clearly isn't. There's no sound argument for why it should be, and there's no reason that government should be taxing that. But generally speaking, in the West, women are not politically oppressed. They used to be, but they are not now. Culturally, you could argue certain cultures, that's not necessarily the case, depending on what exactly you're looking at, particularly which subcultures you're looking at. And I think most of the sort of legitimate concerns that some feminists still have in the West are cultural and not political, and you need to keep those things very separate, because the political involves the use of force, and the cultural is not. And it's not to say that the cultural is less important, but it is different in kind. And then, of course, familial is on an individual level. You might have somebody who's more sexist, misogynistic, whatever, and you have to deal with that on a familial level. And on an individual level, of course, it's the same thing. You can have individual sexists. That doesn't mean that everything is a problem. It means that one individual is a problem. So again, looking at things on an individual level. The other thing is that some feminists, and this is not all feminists, I don't want to paint everybody who calls himself a feminist this way, but some feminists, and in particular, the feminists who are had a lot of cultural influence at the time that Rand was writing, particularly in her later writing, the women's lib movement, was very much in favor of the kind of affirmative action type of things, where you're hiring women to fill a quota, or you're hiring women just to have women, and you're not actually looking at their merits or their accomplishments, or whether they're a fit. And that would be obviously something that objectivism would be opposed to, and that I personally would be opposed to, because it's not beneficial for anyone involved. And as Mathilde also mentioned, there's a lot of, again, not always, but there are a lot of feminists who are in favor of the sort of oppressed or oppressed view, the Marxist view, class struggle kind of view. And the truth is that government intervention hurts women just as much, if not more, than it hurts men. So there's no reason that women should be more opposed to capitalism, which is one of the things that Lola exists to address.
Yes, thank you for stating the affirmative action problem, which hurts women in essence. So yes, I think that a lot of general collectivist feminists, let's call them that, don't realize that affirmative action really hurts women and not helps them eventually. And there's many examples if you are, but I'm not going to get into it because we have very little time. So Isidora, please.
Sure, I'll try to be quick, and then I
take your time. It's fine.
Yeah, I assume there will be some questions. So my position on feminism is that it's a redundant term in the liberal context, and I don't, for that reason, consider myself a feminist. I consider myself an individualist. I think that from the moment that the feminist movement moved from advocating for individual rights to advocating for collective rights of women, like that's the moment when it lost me. And because that happened a long time before my birth, I was never really a feminist. I also think that feminism it started as something good, in a sense that, you know, women didn't have rights, and the feminist movement was in a big way had the I'm sorry, I lost the word there, but they basically were the ones who achieved the female equality in terms of individual rights. But as the movement kind of shifted, what it accomplished is to kind of replace a man as a guardian and as kind of a person who makes decisions for women, shifted from men to the government. And so now the government is the big protector of women. The government is the one that, you know, when women have issues getting, you know, job or getting into institutions, or it's, you know, the government that legislates the quotas, or, you know, openly discriminates against men, and openly discriminates in a way where, you know, sometimes some people are more competent, but they're not going to get a job because they're of a wrong sex. I think that's something that's completely incompatible with individualism, with objectivism, and because I think that's the core of the feminist movement today, and it has been for many decades now. I don't think it's something that we need in the objectivist movement. I don't think it's something that we need to claim as ours, because I think individualism itself already covers all the core ideas that we stand for.
Thank you for this. This is a very clear way of putting it. Thank you. Okay, so we're running a little bit out of time. I just want to say that I could do this for a long time. So if Lola wants to organize another panel, I'm all for it. I just want to say there is going to be, towards the end of June, a conference in Israel organized by, you see here, Boaz Arad, Ayn Rand Center Israel, mainly Boaz, and we are like a team of people organizing this conference. It's the 10th Liberty Conference in Israel. All of you are, of course, invited. It's a one-day conference. Still to be announced the exact date, because we don't have it because of all the war and the things that are changing here. So I want to invite you to that and just watch for publications. And I want to really, really thank you for this, for taking the time. If more people, individuals, not just women, would take the time to promote ideas and to understand the reality around us and how it relates to ideas and how a serious, deep analyzing of ideas and how they are implied in reality would be more common. That would be a great thing. So thank you very, very much for coming here and doing this, and for everybody who came here to listen to it. And thanks to Anna for initiating this panel, and to the organization of Lola. And if you have anything else that you want to say, Angel, Mathilde, or Isidora, now is the time before we finish.
Yeah, super quick. There was something I forgot to mention on the self-esteem point, which Mathilde kind of alluded to in her answer, but didn't say, which is that when you have low self-esteem, it really prevents you from connecting with other people, because you don't see them as full people. You see them as sources of approval or disapproval primarily. And you see this with a bunch of Rand's second-handed characters and people who sort of identify with the people-pleasing type of situation, I think, see that. So just self-esteem is important for forming actual connections, because it's how, without it, it's really hard to see people as full people. So I know that's a sort of tacked on point there, but I forgot to say it. So
yeah, that's exactly what I wish I could say it before. This is my view as well. It is, you said it perfectly. Indeed.
Thank you then. Isidora, any last words?
Well, nothing except, I mean, I really hope for everyone here from Israel that what's happening to you guys right now is gonna end in the, well, best outcome possible sometimes really soon. So, you know, just know that we're thinking about you and supporting you, and whatever I can do, you know, I'm here, and I'd be happy to provide any kind of help that I can.
I think all of you are doing it by talking about the right ideas. That's the best thing we can do, I think. So thank you very much, and good night. And I let Anna do all the technicalities. I don't know exactly, but this is it. Anna says, you are amazing ladies.
thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.